Thanks, Dave. From the creative mind of David Cage, the man behind Heavy Rain, comes Quantic Dream's latest video game experience, Beyond Two Souls. The game stars high-profile film actors Ellen Page and Willem Dafoe. You might even mistake the box art for a movie poster. But if you're familiar with Heavy Rain, you'll recognise this less than conventional approach to gaming.
I was born with a strange gift.
Jody, what have you done?
What am I, a toy? Some kind of a test subject to use me to do your dirty work.
Feels like you're running away from something.
If I had to say how it all began, I might just as well start here.
You play as Jody, a girl who, from the moment she was born, has been linked with an entity. A kind of poltergeist spirit that drifts along beside her. Jody names the entity Aiden, and as the player you can choose to inhabit Aiden just about at any time, to move through walls, disturb objects, and even occasionally possess other human beings.
These are skills that sound pretty useful to the government, however, who have in fact been training Jody to harness Aiden's abilities since her childhood.
Very good, Jody. Let's try something else.
Jody's gifts bring with them alienation, and it's heartbreaking to witness the loneliness of her childhood years, particularly through Aiden's voyeuristic, ghostly gaze.
Susan, that thing is like an uncontrollable animal. We have no idea what it's capable of. We have a demon living with us right under our own roof. You're a monster! Do you hear me? A monster!
Jody eventually grows up in a research facility, with Willem Dafoe playing the scientist that ends up becoming a kind of father figure to her.
I know how you feel.
The timeline jumps around quite a bit as you play through different ages and stages in Jody's life.
Hello?
Nathan?
Jody? Jody, where are you?
I really like this because it kept things fresh and it made the story feel more like a piecing together of puzzle pieces than a straight narrative.
Yeah, I liked it a lot too. Plus, the various ages of the character are expertly captured by Ellen Page. They all feel so different. Jody is a child facing the nightmares that slip through from the other realm. Jody is a rebellious, moody teen.
I didn't ask to be different. I just want to go out and have friends and be like other girls my age.
You'll never be like them.
The game takes you through a huge range of experiences and places in order to tell this story, and the performances are all really incredible.
Eagle 5, requesting immediate extraction. Do you read?
You know, it's just rare to play a video game character as fleshed out as Jody.
Yeah, and really Beyond is as much about the relationships you develop with the people you encounter throughout her life as it is about the world of the supernatural. And of course your relationship with Aiden. And I loved how when you're playing as Aiden, you have this protectiveness and closeness to Jody.
Will you push me, Aiden?
And yet you're given the opportunity to take things too far.
Yeah, as an unseen, untouchable force, it definitely taps into that darker side, doesn't it? But particularly when Jody is threatened or picked on, because you have the choice to take revenge. I mean, it's easy to call it justice, but there's always that moment where you take things a little bit too far and you're left wondering what came over you.
I also found it quite intense when you take over another person's body and their actions. This is used in the game relatively harmlessly in some situations, but later on when Jody is recruited into the CIA, this ability is used to force an enemy to kill his comrades.
Well, let's talk about the controls. However interesting this story may be, this more passive player experience will take some getting used to. Quantic Dream really wanted to minimise the interface even further than with their previous game, Heavy Rain. The majority of the time, the only prompts on screen are little white dots, and by moving the right thumbstick towards them, you'll prompt an action animation to play out.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I played Heavy Rain, and that first hour is this adjustment period where you get used to the fact that your involvement is actually quite minimal. You're basically taking part in a constant stream of QuickTime actions to affect how each moment in the scene plays out.
You know, it's almost more exhausting playing a game this way because you're not as actively engaged. You know, you're less connected to the controller, and yet you never fully relax into it because you're involved in every little minor action rather than the major ones like running and gunning and moving the camera around.
You can still walk around and explore, but the game is quick to tell you when you're heading in the wrong direction, and that feels a bit obtrusive.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the game needs to guide you in the right direction, and I'd rather it do that than have me floundering around wondering where to go, but there's got to be a subtler way to do it than that.
I was just so irritated at how fixed the camera was in general. I know David Cage wants to direct these scenes like a film, but it's just so restrictive and annoying, and I was hoping they'd learn a few more lessons from Heavy Rain.
Yeah, although I did really like that you almost never have to repeat an action if you fail it. The scene just plays out in a different way. Combat, for example, happens in a kind of bullet time where you simply move the thumbstick in the direction of the strike or dodge. And if you really suck in a fight, then Aiden might have to bail you out. Or, for example, when I failed to jump heroically through this window of a burning building, someone then ran in to save me. So, rather than accomplishing a task, your role is more to affect and change how that moment plays out.
It's not very consistent, though, is it? The controls in these combat moments.
Good luck, Jodie!
The areas where Jodie is a CIA operative in Somalia are, story-wise, some of the greatest and most affecting in the game.
Climb.
But the run and cover system was just awkward and clunky.
Yes, I think anyone who's played a conventional shooter will be screaming in frustration at the simplicity of the mechanics. But you're right, I think it is more the inconsistency of those controls that really let it down. It took me half the game to figure out when it wanted me to hold a button or just tap it and let go. There's a super daggy training montage to teach you this, but it just doesn't do a very good job.
Yeah, I just don't think these mechanics lend themselves well to the high-action scenes. I loved the way these incredible scenes and locations contributed to the story, but your minimal involvement in these high-action sequences just felt a bit awkward. When there's an intense moment happening, but all you get to do is tap a button to swim or roll out of the way, it's a little abrupt and anticlimactic.
Controlling Aiden, thankfully, is fairly straightforward. He floats as an omnipresent force, and while you're always attached to Jodie by a metaphysical leash, the freedom to be able to go ahead and scope the landscape in front of you and create distractions is really great.
Aiden. Find a way to open that door.
One really cool feature is that you can play this with another person in co-op, playing as Aiden on a touchscreen device. In fact, you can play this entire game with a touchscreen if you want to, connected to your PS3 via Wi-Fi. We tested this out, and given that the controls are so simple, it actually works quite well. And it plays into David Cage's ethos of accessibility.
Yeah, in fact, we caught up with the man himself and he spoke a little bit about this.
We learned a lot on Heavy Rain. Many people played the game with someone else, so the player was holding the controller, but there was a second person sat on the couch, really enjoying the experience and sharing the experience. And most of the time playing the puppet master, like saying, do this, do that, don't go there. And it was very interesting because on Beyond we thought, okay, what can we do to make this second person play and not just watch? Most of all, we understood that the controller could be a barrier for these people to enter the game space, and we thought, okay, let's see what we can do to offer them a simplified controller. For us, this is a big evolution, trying to make the game accessible to a wider audience.
Despite the controls feeling a bit awkward at times, you do settle into it. It may seem strange at first, playing a role in such mundane actions, but this kind of storytelling is about making you feel more connected to the character than ever. And there is a wonderful sense of contrast, as one minute you might be fighting off spectral demons in the desert, and the next you might be chopping vegetables.
Ah, it's a roller coaster, Barjo. You're braving snowstorms, delivering babies.
Okay.
Yes, from the makers of the game that brought you Press X to Jason comes Press X to cut umbilical cord. But I think the simplest scenes are almost more affecting because often those are the choices that end up carrying the most weight. And that might be for the story or for your personal relationship with the characters. The scene where Jodie is preparing for a date was one where I suddenly felt real ownership over the decisions I made for her, even though there were silly things like choosing what music to play or what to wear. Because I wanted her to be herself, and I suppose I related to that situation and the normalcy of it all. And Jodie's yearning for a normal life is ever present.
Jodie, I think there's something wrong with Aiden.
Give me a second. I'm fed up with you and your goddamn jealousy. So why don't you just go back to whatever ethereal fucking place you came from and let me get on with my life?
I think the game's greatest triumph is the way that it uses player choice to constantly change the experience. Sometimes you're presented with some really intense options that will either prompt you to make a decision based purely on curiosity, or truly make you take pause to consider how you want things to work out for Jodie.
Yeah, and some of these choices really do carry consequence, but then some just funnel you back into whatever decision the game wants you to make, which I find really irritating. For example, when teen Jodie goes to a bar and is asked by a seedy guy to play a game of pool, I was like, oh hell no, creep. But then the scene just has her eventually accepting anyway.
All right, just one game.
I understand certain actions need to play out in order to tell a particular story, but then why give me the option if it's not going to have any effect on the outcome?
Yeah, there was a fair bit of that in Heavy Rain as well, the illusion of choice.
Just go to your room.
This is a really interesting game, and I think we can keep talking about it for hours, which really is a testament to the fact that it is such a unique experience. For me, this is one of those occasions where there are many obvious flaws, and even the core mechanics might be enough to turn people off. But once I was in this, I was in it. The story was dark, at times terrifying. The relationship between Jodie and Aiden is so complex.
Stop that, Aiden. I told you I didn't want to play with you anymore.
And it's a game that made me feel things, real things. You know, I played through multiple different endings just to see if the outcomes really were genuinely different, and I'm happy to say that they were. But even going back and deliberately making different decisions was so hard for me because I felt so connected to the choices that I'd made for Jodie that going against that just made me feel really uncomfortable, even though I wasn't overriding my save.
I think any game that tries to challenge gamers in unique ways like this is really exciting. I wish they'd learnt their lesson from Heavy Rain though, because some of these core mechanics and controls are just so frustrating and awkward, and they should have been improved upon. But even with those issues, I had a really personal and connected experience to this game, and that's a pretty rare thing. I don't think I'd want to play more than one of these types of games a year, but I had a great time with this one, so I'm giving it 7 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Would I recommend this? Absolutely, but I can't guarantee that everyone will love it. I'm giving it 8 out of 10.
Tired of fighting, yeah. Tired of fighting.